Welcome to an RTR production of Respond to Racism's monthly community meeting, February 6th, 2023. The speakers are Joycelin Jolly and Bob Henderson. The topic of this episode is achieving world citizenship and discussing the concept of world citizenship as it means to create a globally integrated world, as well as exploring how bias is taught in the early stages of human development and how it can be mitigated as supported by current brain research.
I ask that you join me in listening to all of the things that we're going to do tonight. Our mission is to educate and empower Lake Oswego residents and institutions with the tools to combat racism in all its forms and make Lake Oswego and Oregon a better place to live for all of our residents of all races and ethnicities. I want to ask you now to join me at this time in a moment of silence for Tyree Nichols, who lost his life at the hands of some Memphis police officers over a traffic stop. Behaviors like many of you witnessed with the footage from the body cameras will not be tolerated. So just know that a change is going to come. Will you join me in a moment of silence? Thank you. Tonight, Sarah, one of our youth, will be reading the land acknowledgement.
Hi, my name is Sarah. Today, I would like to honor those people whose lands we reside on here in Lake Oswego. The Maulala, the Cayuse, the Tualatin Kalapuya, the Willamette Tumwater, the Wasco Wishram, the Clackamas Chinook, and the other Chinook people of the Willamette area. We acknowledge those tribes as the original inhabitants of the land and recognize their forced removal from their land. Land acknowledgements are more than just explanations name-checking the tribes and native nations whose lands we occupy. These statements help demonstrate respect for and awareness of the enduring relationship between Indigenous people and place. Acknowledgements do not exist in past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current, ongoing process, and it behooves us to seek and build an understanding of our present participation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have gratitudes and acknowledgements. In December, we had our community meeting, and we want to thank and recognize Right to Be for providing the training, our community for participating in the bystander intervention in public spaces. And Sarah, who was one of our youth as a panelist. Thank you, Sarah. And for story time, that every month, Catherine Phelps presents interesting stories that our little folks just eat up. Thanks to Mary Woods for hosting the BIPOC Women's Monthly Speaker Series that started in October and will run through March. Gratitudes also for the observation of Martin Luther King's Jr. Day in Lake Oswego. We want to thank the city of Lake Oswego, the Lake Oswego Public Library, LO for Love, the Baha'is of Lake Oswego, our volunteers, and the officers from the Lake Oswego Police Department for escorting participants during the car rally. And a big shout out to Sergeant Jay Whiteman, who just retired from the police department. He has been a staunch supporter of Respond to Racism and our mission. And we will miss you, Jay. Thank you so much. Thank you for the 40 plus people who participated in the show of support for Tyree Nichols' family and one little African American boy who was sitting in the passing car in the back seat was heard saying, when he looked at the people standing there, they're standing up there for people like me. And now it's time for our first poll. Did you perform one of the 5 Ds of the bystander interventions? Distract, delegate, document, delay, direct. A yes or no? Thank you. And we should be able to move on. Our agreements for tonight's meeting is to be brave, share your ideas, ask questions, and engage in conversation. Let others speak, respectfully listen to understand, and be open to new ideas. Share your unique perspective and speak honestly. Critique ideas, not people. Ask clarifying questions, respect each other's thinking, and value their contributions. Honor confidentiality. Our outcomes, expected outcomes, will get acquainted with who is in the room and wanting to respond to racism in Lake Oswego or wherever you reside. We won't solve racism in 2 hours. You'll leave the meeting with more questions than you came with. You'll have one actionable item, and you will have more ideas of how you can interrupt racism. Tonight's program title is Achieving Rural Citizenship. Joycelin Jolly is an author, educator, classical musician, and visual artist. She is a native of Brooklyn, New York, and founder and director of Joy Star Studios, a production company and organization that provides affordable instrumental music instruction. Ms. Jolly has performed internationally as a musician and a soloist, and currently plays with the Johns Hopkins Concert Orchestra. She is working on the final stages of 2 books she's written about her proudest achievement is being the mother of Daniela Bahia, an artist and musician in her own right. Bob Henderson is a native of San Jose, California, and holds a degree in psychology. He is a member of the National Association of African American Police Officers and retired from law enforcement after 26 years. Bob gives regular presentations about the history of law enforcement and has dedicated his life to studying African American history, which is an American story. He assists diverse groups in understanding from a historical perspective why we continue to have 2 different criminal justice systems, one for Blacks and one for whites, and the law enforcement's role in breaking this cycle by building trust within the respective communities they serve. Please welcome our presenters for the evening.
Thank you, Willie. And anything to be said, I want Joycelin to go first, ladies first, as I always like to do.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. We are excited about being here to explore with you. It sounds like you all do a lot of work on this issue. And we are Vision Core Learning, and we want to be sure that you know that none of us have all the answers, but collectively we do have the capacity to interrupt racism and to create the world that has well-being for all of us and for our planet. I'd like to give you an overview of some of the things that we will share with you this evening. The first thing being, humanity has reached the stage where we need a universal, a global identity. We need to function as a single unit to challenge and solve issues that cannot be solved by one nation alone. And there's a system called World Citizenship that we'll share with you. It's endorsed by the UN that is meant to achieve that goal. We'll talk to you about America's role in world citizenship. We'll talk about how racial bias is learned, what we can do to unlearn it, and some hopeful approaches from the science community about our healing of our racism in our thoughts and our behaviors. And then we have our breakout rooms, which we are looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Bob.
Thanks, Joycelin. So again, welcome everyone. I'm so glad everyone's here so we can have this discussion on a very, very important topic of, as Joycelin mentioned, this concept of world citizenship. Okay, it's a great concept. It's a reality. We live in a globally integrated world, but there are some major barriers to achieving that. And one of those major barriers to achieving a sense of global peace based on justice and equity and equality for all people is this notion of prejudice and bias. And so that has to, we have to overcome that. We have to seek ways to be able to do that. So our presentation is going to weigh heavily on what science has to say about the elimination of, first of all, how bias and prejudice is formed, and then some suggestions and tips as to how we can overcome it. So we look forward to sharing with you what we've come up with. And again, we are Vision Core Learning, and we hope to have a wonderful, lively, engaging discussion with you on this topic. So with that said, I think, John, you're running our slides. You can put up the first slide for us.
Okay, so we would like to tell you a little bit about what our aim and mission of Vision Core Learning is. We are an educational program that strives to eliminate all forms of bias. We aim to eliminate bias from the broader perspective of world citizenship through science, the arts, and accurate historical fact. We promote the development of critical thinking skills and the utilization of proven and practical strategies to eliminate racial bias that align with the global ethic of world citizenship. Next. So now we need to tell you a little bit about what world citizenship is. It is a program that's been developed. The United Nations endorses it. And there's a lot of information you can get from the United Nations about it, but we'll share a bit tonight. Its main goal is to build a just and prosperous civilization for all. Next. So world citizenship is a global ethic on the principle of unity and diversity. So our unity is in our vibrational and our subatomic being, and our diversity is in the external appearances. So this global ethic aims to create a just and peaceful world community. To bring about such a world requires us to rid ourselves of all forms of prejudgments involving race, class, culture, creed, nation, gender, and economics. These factors are significant barriers to the well-being and prosperity for every person and the well-being of our planet. World citizenship is a tool to develop universal identity and unified patterns of social action for peace, well-being of all nations and people. Why is it vital? Today, we're faced with the sobering and urgent fact that if civilization is to survive, we must develop the science of just human relationships, the ability of all peoples of all kind to live and work in the same world at peace. We're faced with planetary challenges that require planetary collaboration for our individual and collective survival. Among them are rapid climate change, technology, we're dealing with cyber attacks, gender roles, racism, health inequities, and extremes of wealth and poverty, war, refugees, migration, and international corruption, government corruption. As yet, we may remain unable to find ways to collaborate for the benefit of all people, all species, and the planet itself. A universal identity is the precursor that's needed that is universal in its effects. World citizenship is a way to expand our personal, national identities into a universal identity and develop unified patterns of social action for the well-being of all people. So nothing ever happens before it's visualized. So we're going to do some imagining here. Everything comes from what ifs, because what if is creativity. So let's imagine. A world language and a world script. Every person is educated in this across the planet. Each nation sustains their national language, but in addition, they have an auxiliary world language, and that will solve a lot of difficulties. So these things would be taught in universality education across the planet in all schools. A global ethic. How do we treat one another? If we had a universal global ethic that we were held to a standard, what would that look like? Imagine a world currency that would eliminate some of the economic oppression of one nation over the other. World system of weights and measures would make things much easier. Imagine a world flag. What would that look like? A world anthem and a world dance. All of those things taught in schools across our planet. So what if an international group of linguists, educators, economists, religious leaders, and artists came together to design the following? Those things that we just mentioned. So we can imagine and envision, and our thoughts have such power that those things can be brought into fruition. Okay, so America and world citizenship. We have the most diverse population on the planet, and that puts us in the most unique position to lead the world toward global citizenship. We have a problem, though. We're not ready to lead in America. And that problem is our historic and persistent and most challenging issue, racism. Like war, racism benefits none of us. We're all adversely impacted. It's a major barrier to the health of our nation, and any possible notions of leadership in the world citizenship is not currently possible. Our structural racism and our individual acts of racial bias, they daily flood the American and world media. We debate, we deny, we cry, we suffer, we fear, we are traumatized. We argue to no avail, and there's a reason why, and there is hope. The scientific community offers some new approaches on our ingrained beliefs about racial bias, racism, and human identity. So let's explore a little bit about science and racism and what that connection is. So all of these divisions of science come into play and have approaches, and our technology has brought us to places where we can see more and more of how the brain works, how our bodies work, and how our thoughts and beliefs impact our bodies and our environment. So some basic things we need to know from quantum physics is, and you may know this, everything is connected at the subatomic level. People, nature, space, the universe. Our minds and bodies are also integrally connected in the subconscious mind, and it becomes the mind-body. They are inseparable. So what affects the mind affects the body. Okay, so that's two thoughts. And our thoughts have this phenomenal power to affect our outer world, our inner being, and our physiology. So what are our habitual thoughts and beliefs around racism? And they live in our subconscious mind, and they can either have beneficial or adverse effects on our bodies. So maladaptive habitual thoughts and beliefs weaken our organs in our body, and their accompanying emotions affect our bodies adversely. So racial bias is maladaptive habitual belief. It's not based in any objective truth or fact. So if racist thought is embedded in the subconscious mind, we cannot change it in our rational minds, with our rational minds. So the question is, how do we change our subconscious mind? Neuroscience tells us that we can access the subconscious mind through our brain wave states. And they are beta, alpha, delta, theta, and gamma. And Bob will be speaking more about that in detail for you. But these brainwave states can be transform maladaptive thought into beneficial thought. So in other words, we can change our thoughts from non-beneficial to beneficial thoughts through the use of our brainwave states. And we'll be talking about how to do that. Basically, we become conscious of our unconscious programs, and we kind of hack it the way you do a platform or program in a computer. So scientifically speaking, if we can change the subconscious program, we can heal our racism. That's the good news. But first of all, how does it get embedded in our subconscious? And how does it get embedded in the minds of our children?
Thank you so much, Joycelin. And as Joycelin was talking about, about world citizenship, one of the major barriers to that is various forms of prejudice and bias. So I want to talk to you about our brainwave states and how bias and prejudice gets embedded in our subconscious mind. I'm going to discuss brainwave states as it relates to, again, the subconscious, conscious mind. So think of our mind like a computer. So the hard drive would be equivalent to our subconscious mind, while our conscious mind would be equivalent to the computer screen. From the findings of social psychology and neuroscience, we know that approximately 95% of our thoughts, our attitudes, and behavior come from our subconscious mind. Okay, so here's a graph that kind of, you can follow along as I share some things with you. So I want to share that with you, that we learn in two different modes. One way we learn is through, you can call it conscious learning, right? Which is when we are engaged in the learning process. It's like the format of going to school, right? You go to school, there's an instructor, you're taking notes, you're paying attention, right? You're fully engaged. You're conscious of what's going on. You're engaged in the process. There's another aspect of our learning that is not oftentimes talked about, which is unconscious learning, which is also called classical learning, which I'll talk a bit about later. And this is a type of learning that happens unconditionally. And these two types of learning would be discussed further down in the presentation. So how does all this relate to how a person becomes biased? Let's consider what science has to say by reviewing our brainwave states. So let's start with the lowest state, which is delta. So between 0 and 2 years of age, the human brain functions primarily in the lowest brainwave cycle. That is 1 to 3 cycles per second. The delta brainwave state explains why a newborn usually can't remain awake for more than a few moments. Now, as adults, the delta frequency is when we are literally unconscious, in a state of sleep. The theta frequency, as we talk about age development and child development, it's between the ages of 2 to 6 years. And in the science community, believes that that is when our personality actually gets formed. The brain waves have changed into theta frequency 4 to 7 cycles per second. And children at this stage primarily live in a realm of imagination and daydreaming. You could say that this is a super learning state where the child is open to suggestions. Children at this stage are likely to accept what you tell them as true without any question. A child's superpower, you could say, is within the rate in this age range, within this age range, is imitation. The power to imitate. That is how, for example, children can master, before their prefrontal cortex is even developed, that is how they can master learning a complex language, because they are absorbing everything in their environments, good or bad. However, what if a child is taught to be biased or exposed to stereotyping in their environment during this stage? You could say, as I used before as an analogy, that their hard drive, meaning subconscious mind at this stage, is being externally programmed by their environment. Now, for me, logic tells me that if we have bias in our society and prejudice, then we'll have bias and prejudice in our children. Let's talk about the alpha frequency. This occurs between the ages of 6 to 12 years, where the brain waves have changed into an alpha frequency 8 to 12 cycles per second. This is the point at which the analytical mind begins to form. Children start to interpret and draw conclusions from their environment, based, however, on their subconscious programming. So it'd be fair to say we don't see the world as it actually is. We see the world as we are. The alpha frequency is also a bridge between the subconscious and the conscious mind. So I'll talk a little bit briefly about the beta state, the beta frequency, which is, you could say, our conscious mind, things that we're conscious of. Occurs between the ages of 8 to 12 and beyond. Brain activity increases to above 12 cycles per second. This is the world of consciousness, right? Being conscious, analytical thinking. The mind is awake, focused, alert, and capable of logical thinking. Adults spend most of their time in this cycle, in this frequency. Now, this is a state of mind where the outer world is more real than the inner world of imagination, right? We can distinguish that as adults. As mentioned, the conscious mind is like the computer screen we talked about. So most of the information, if you're following my logic in this, like a computer, is in the hard drive. It's in our subconscious mind. We're only getting a small percentage of that information. And I will leave you with this question. What is behind what is being shown on the screen of your conscious mind?
So now that we know a little bit about how racial bias gets into our subconscious mind, let's take a look at the social impact of racial bias. As we already stated, everyone is adversely impacted, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and even economically. So generally speaking, we are either bystanders or we are perpetrators, consciously or unconsciously, or we are targets of racial bias. Now, getting back to quantum physics, our emotions carry vibrational frequencies. And those frequencies either benefit us or they weaken our physiology. So let's take a look at how that plays out with the emotions of racism. So in quantum energy medicine, there is a correlation between our organs and our emotions. So when we have the impact of those emotions on the target populations function in high beta mode. So that's our analytical mind. And their life energy resonates at the vibration of victimization, injustice, identity threat, conflict, struggle, distress, self-hatred, injury, mental and physical danger, imitation of the oppressor, constant fatigue, courage, resilience, faith, activism, and depression. So the corresponding organs to emotions you can see on the chart. Fear debilitates our kidneys. Anger and rage burn up the liver. Grief is connected to our lungs, despair, heart, insecurity, kidney, worry, spleen. So often we hear, okay, African Americans tend to have this disease. There is nothing intrinsic about that. It's all related to these correlations between emotions and our organs. Next, please. So this is where most of us fall, is as bystanders if we're not part of the target population. And the bystander population of racism functions at the moderate beta mode. The life energy predominantly resonates at the frequencies of denial, fear, compassion, helplessness, a sense of separateness and guilt, and activism. The organs corresponding to the above emotions are degraded and attract diseases that resonate at the frequency of that predominant life energy. And there they are, you can read them, I won't read to you. Next, please. And now we have the racial bias impact on the perpetrator population. And we have both conscious and unconscious perpetrators. And they operate in high beta survival mode. The life energy predominantly resonates at the level of anger, rage, chronic bitterness, fear, aggression. And these are the emotions connected to the liver, to the organs, anger, the liver, fear, kidney, etc. Perpetrator populations live in fear of loss of power. And fear of revenge. So a large part of them has to do with the anger and the fear and aggression. The issue of identity, she says we are light. Quantum physics says we are both particle and wave. Light is a wave. In the first song we heard this evening, we heard the words, do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly? Do we know who we are? So if we look at this chart, we can see that we see ourselves most of the time on the right side of this. These are our attached identity. This is our diversity. And on the left side is our likenesses that we don't pay much attention to. It's our unity. And unity in diversity is one of the underpinning pieces of world citizenship. And we need to know ourselves on both sides of this chart. So basically, we are not intrinsically our thoughts, what we have, what we do, where we live, what we wear, our gender, what has happened to us, our skin color. Those are appended identities. Those are attached. Our superpowers are on the left side. And I want to just say for a moment, do you know that there are more stars in the universe than grains of sand on the planet? And we have more neurons in our brains than the stars in the universe. That's the power of who we are, who we all are. That's the power we have to solve our local and global challenges. We are amazing, but we haven't begun to tap that power. We're caught up in the trivial aspects on the right side of the chart. our diversity, and we're unacquainted with the superpowers on the left side. So let's take a look. First of all, we are consciousness. Not every species is conscious that it's alive. Consciousness is energy. We are energy. We are emotion. Emotion is a vibration. We are electromagnetic. Our thoughts are electric. Our beliefs and experiences are magnetic. We are particle and wave. We are multidimensional. We are subconscious, conscious, and superconscious. We are extrasensory and we are multisensory. We have our 5 senses, but we have ways of knowing beyond our 5 senses. So another scientific thing that took place, and an international body of science tracked the DNA blueprint of the human species back in 2006. And the results were that we all are 99.9% identical in the content of our genetic materials as a species. That leaves 0.1% differences or diversity. Unfortunately, we have flipped the script from our 99% alikeness to the less than 1% differences. Oops, I can't get my thing to go further. And that 0.1% is our diversity. Based on our insignificant 0.1% of diversity, we've dehumanized others, created barriers and divisions between us, bullied and persecuted one another, enacted laws to support our faulty notions of race. We need to flip the script back. We are truly one race.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no, where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, well, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean, but I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yeah, Kamchasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place in my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
No, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea, double, toil and trouble. Montague, beware Jack the Ripper. Bloody hell! Hip hip, cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? Weird? Must be a Crane thing.
Okay, so let's talk about the science behind implicit bias. When we think about bias, oftentimes we talk in terms of explicit bias. Someone's doing something very obvious that they're harming others, doing things based on a sort of a racist or sexist or any type of form of prejudice, right? Sort of it's explicit. But I think what we need to really talk about more about is the implicit bias, right? Things that we're not even conscious of. So implicit bias is an unconscious association, belief, or attitude toward any social group. Implicit bias does not mean someone is a racist. I'll make that very clear. It does not mean someone is a racist. We all have implicit bias to some degree or another. It is the way the mind forms associations. We are all influenced by our culture. Part of our culture is the media, images, news, etc. Our values, our language, our various norms, right? So our culture is a powerful influence, influencing that aspect of us where we form associations leading to implicit bias. Our family, our education, even the period in history that you were born, our peer group. So here's some of the evidentiary results of implicit bias. And what I plan on doing, because I have all the studies done on this as a resource. I can get that to you later. But for now, I wanted to just mention a few of these that I have here. Harvard's implicit association test results, and you're probably familiar with this. Harvard's implicit bias test, which measures the strength of someone's stereotypes, which is designed to really reveal your hidden subconscious bias. And it usually pits Black and white faces. And oftentimes what you find in this study is the negative characteristics are assigned to Black faces and positive characteristics are assigned to white faces. So this is kind of across the board when you add up the stats on this. Studies in hiring practice based on racially sounding names on resumes. Again, these are all examples of implicit bias. People aren't intentionally necessarily doing these things. Professors check emails at a higher rate based on racially sounding names. Gender discrimination when hiring. Doctors assigning different treatment plans based on race. You can imagine the impact of that. Viewing Black people as having a higher tolerance for pain, etc. There's been some studies done on perceptions, so perceptual illusions in which Black faces are viewed as angrier than white faces with the same expression, and harmless objects appear more as weapons when in the hands of Black men. And the criminal justice system disproportionately arrests, sentences, and incarcerates more people of color than any other race. And there's some studies done. I like the study done by the Sentencing Project, which was done in 2013. The Sentencing Project is a Washington-based, DC-based research and advocacy center, and their goal is to reduce incarceration in the U.S. and racial disparities in the criminal justice system. So they determined that this is the case. They actually wrote a letter to the United Nations citing that this is a human rights violation. And all this is happening again at a subconscious level. And we need to really learn more and talk more about that. How implicit bias is, how it forms and how it resonates and how it's part of our brain. So I want to focus on the amygdala regarding that. So the amygdala is located deep within our temporal lobes. So you have two of them, right? You have two sides of the brain. So the amygdala, you have two. The amygdala is part of the limbic system of the brain and controls emotions and memories associated with sensory input. The amygdala is responsible for our fight, flight, or our freeze response. The amygdala responds and reacts. It's a reactionary type thing that to threats, and the threats could either be real or imagined at the subconscious level, and forms the basis of our implicit bias. One of the major functions of the amygdala is it's designed to detect a threat in our environment, which has evolved over millions of years. So, but how does the brain know what constitutes a threat and what does not? I mean, there are things our brain has been hardwired to fear that has kept us alive over millions of years, such as heights and snakes and various predators, particularly those with sharp teeth that chase us. The brain, however, has not learned to distinguish between an actual threat and an imagined threat. So think about how the people react when asked to do public speaking, right? Their bodies might tense up and they may react in the same way as if they're facing some saber-toothed tiger, millions of years ago. There are many things we are afraid of that are not actual threats. This is called the amygdala hijack. This is when our emotions overwhelm the rational part of our brain. When we detect a threat, here's sort of what happens. When we detect a threat, the amygdala activates the fight, flight, or freeze response before the conscious mind can interpret what is going on. In other words, you have to react. In other words, you react to a threat before your conscious mind is even aware of it. So if you've imagined a threat in your mind, whether real or imagined, your conscious mind is the last to know. Your reactive mind, your subconscious mind, is the first to know, and that's a result of our survival skill as a brain has evolved over centuries. The brain has an early warning system, I guess you could say. So let's talk about fear conditioning, one of the bullet points there. And when I think of conditioning, fear conditioning, I think of the work of behaviorists like B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov. You may recall the work of Ivan Pavlov with his classical study where he had a dog salivating to the sound of a bell. And what he learned is that when you pair a neutral stimulus, like the tone of a bell, with a known stimulus like meat, and you repeatedly pair the two together in the presence of the dog will eventually salivate to the sound of the tone. Now, the reason why this study was significant is because as humans, our brain also forms associations, whether true or false, on a subconscious level. We call this stereotyping. This is how stereotypes operate in our minds. So if I say something silly like peanut butter, you probably are already thinking jelly, right? We've already formed that association. If I say Wall Street broker, what race immediately comes to mind? If I say criminal, what race is likely to enter into your mind? If I say someone is excellent at math, what race might come to mind, right? So we have these associations that we make. Now, the reason why we make these associations is because the amygdala is right next to the hippocampus, which is responsible for memories associated with sensory input at the subconscious level. The hippocampus is also responsible for hosting memories that are imagined threat. So just to recap on this, implicit bias has three components. One, it's bias that you're not aware of. It's unconscious. And keep in mind, as I mentioned earlier, 95% of our behaviors or attitudes and our thoughts are coming from our subconscious mind. So implicit bias has three components. It's subconscious, and it can run counter to your explicit beliefs. In other words, a person can say, I'm not a sexist or bigot or anything like that, right? They can outwardly say that and actually believe that sincerely, but then their behavior implicitly says otherwise, right? So what's going on there, right? And what's going on there is this implicit bias that I've been talking about. And it can be triggered by rapid and automatic associations. So remember, the subconscious mind is reactive. It reacts, right? It doesn't process like our cortex does, like our prefrontal cortex, and the part of our brain that is responsible for logic and reasoning and so forth, right? And it's triggered by the sort of rapid responses to things. And so it's important to think about, like, how are we going to address this issue if the programming is so embedded and we're not conscious of it? So before you play the slide, I just wanted to make a few comments. You can keep it there. So this is what you're going to see is an example of how remember I talked about the different brainwave states and how children are in this sort of hypnotic state. And so watch this video and pay attention closely to the impact of children in this hypnotic state, basically being programmed to think a certain way.
I'd like you to imagine you're a third grade school teacher in a small town in Iowa, Riceville, Iowa, and you're trying to teach children what discrimination is, what racism is, shortly after the murder of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. The problem is your kids are all white, your kids are all Protestant, your kids all come from farming and lower middle class families. They've grown up together, they know each other. How do you get them to feel, to experience at a personal level what discrimination is all about? Jane Elliott was that teacher, that school teacher at Riceville, Iowa, back in the early 70s. And she did what I think is one of the most powerful demonstrations of all time. Not by a psychologist, but by a third grade school teacher. Let's look at the power of negative expectations and the power of teachers to shape the reality of students.
It's remarkable how small a difference among people can trigger prejudice, and how hard it is to stop prejudice once it takes hold. In no time at all, we can create a totally new construction of reality to define those we dislike and fear because they are different. A provocative demonstration of the nature of prejudice took place not in a psychologist's laboratory, but at a school in Riceville, Iowa.
Would you like to try this? Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Is there anything about
After the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in 1968, Jane Elliott, a third grade teacher, decided to teach her class just what it means to experience arbitrary discrimination. Elliott divided her class into two groups, the inferior brown-eyed people and the superior blue-eyed people.
I mean, the blue-eyed people are the better people in this room. Oh, yes, they are. Blue-eyed people are smarter than brown-eyed people. My dad isn't that stupid. Is your dad brown-eyed? Yeah. One day you came to school and you told us that he kicked you. He did. Do you think a blue-eyed father would kick his son? Yeah. My dad's blue-eyed. He's never kicked me. Greg's dad is blue-eyed. He's never kicked him. Greg's dad is blue-eyed. He's never kicked him. What color eyes did George Washington have? Blue. This is a fact. Blue-eyed people are better than brown-eyed people. You brown-eyed people are not to play with the blue-eyed people on the playground because you are not as good as blue-eyed people. Well, the brown-eyed people in this room today are going to wear collars so that we can tell from a distance what color your eyes are. So the blue-eyed people each come up and get a collar. You can choose someone to put this collar on. And it seemed like when we were down on the bottom, everything bad was happening to us. The way they treated you felt like you didn't even want to try to do anything. It seemed like Mrs. Elliott was taking our best friends away from us. What happened at recess? Were two of you boys fighting? Yeah, Russell and John. What happened, John? Russell called me names and I hit him in the gut. What did he call you? Brown eyes. Did you call him brown eyes? They always call us that. We want to get all of them. Yeah, boys call us brown eyes. Then they were calling us blue eyes. I wasn't. Sandy and Donna were. Yeah. What's wrong with being called brown eyes? It means that we're stupider. No, not that. Oh, that's just the same way as other people call black people niggers. Yeah. Is that the reason you hit him, John? Did it help? Did it stop him? Did it make you feel better inside? After? Did it make you feel better inside? Laugh at you when you did? I watched what had been marvelous, cooperative, wonderful, thoughtful children turn into nasty, vicious, discriminating little third graders in a space of 15 minutes. I think I learned more from the superior children than I did from the children who were considered superior, than I did from the children who were considered inferior, because their personalities changed even more than the others did.
So we can imagine over centuries of time how embedded those thoughts and feelings are in our American subconscious minds. But here's the good news. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to rewire new information into the synaptic networks of our brains. And we can access our subconscious minds and reprogram them. So in terms of race, that would mean that we could feed new and objective truth about racism into our minds, and we can hack the subconscious mind with that information and reprogram it. And we have the astronomical power to do that if we so choose to do that. We have the astronomical power to make individual and societal change without conflict. So some quantum facts in you. You are an integral part of the earth and the universe. There is no separation between us or the universe. Everything is quantumly entangled at the subatomic level. That's the level where we are one. People, nature, space, and the universe. Quantum physics has measured an electromagnetic field around the human body 4 to 5 feet, extending out 4 to 5 feet. And this magnetic field carries information. And this is how, as a species, we're connected to all other things. That's our unity. All other things and our planet at the subatomic level. The human heart sends and receives signals into this electromagnetic field around our bodies at the frequencies of our thoughts and emotions. Let's see, we can go back to, okay, this is how we affect one another. All right, this piece of art depicts the magnetic field around the planet. And we have the capacity to connect the two fields. And that's where our ESP comes from, our intuitions come from, synchronicities, inventions, creativity, art is the connection between these two fields. So this is how we affect one another and our planet with our thoughts at the subatomic level. And the good news again is we can choose what thoughts and emotions we want to emit from our hearts into that field. So now we can go back to 27, please. And we'll talk about the tools that we have, which are metacognition and meditation. Metacognition is thinking about the way we're thinking. What are the patterns of our thoughts? It's observing our automatic thought patterns and what we believe without judgment. Once you're observing those thoughts, you have hacked the program. You're now in control of the program. It's not automatic. So metacognition is something that we can practice. So you've taken control of the automatic program, and once you have control over that program, you can change it. Only you have control over it. Only you can change what beliefs and thoughts you no longer want to believe and reprogram your brain to what you do want to believe about race or any topic of your choice. Meditation is how we enter the subconscious mind and rewire our brains with new thoughts and intentions. Meditation is where we unravel the maladaptive thoughts about race or any topic and rewire the brain with new intentions and thoughts. Meditation gives us access to our brainwave states from alpha to gamma, bringing us into our higher nature. Here we experience joy and bliss and well-being for ourselves and others. Here is where we rid ourselves of the pain of racial bias and racism. Joyful people experiencing bliss cannot harm themselves or others or our planet. So metacognition is the tool to stop the automatic nervous system and the subconscious mind, and meditation is the process to reprogram it. This information that we've shared about science tonight is but a teaspoonful out of an ocean of research and data and new technology at our disposal to make personal and collective changes in our lives. If this were a live presentation now, we would go into a demonstration of the meditation process. But I think what we will do is I'll give you a very quick idea of the steps, and we can send you the information so that you can explore for yourself, because these words cannot possibly adequately describe the experience. It's something that you have to feel yourself. So meditation, there's a lot of talk about meditation and different kinds. The meditation to change the synaptic connections in your brain is intention-based meditation. And the steps are as follows. You sit or lie down quietly away from all distractions with your eyes closed, cell phone off, the cat out the room, etc. You focus on your heartbeat and feel it. And then you try to feel that heartbeat in different parts of your body. You feel your breath entering and exiting the body. This takes away, that puts you in internal focus and blocks out your external stimuli. So you stay present with the feelings in your body. What are you feeling? What do you experience? If your mind strays, you just return your focus to your breath and your heartbeat. You may feel shifts in your breathing or heartbeat or tingling in your body. Stay focused on feeling the body. When you feel that, your brain is starting to shift into different wave patterns, the higher wave patterns. And they're synchronizing your heart and your brain wave patterns, and they bring you a sense of joy and bliss. When you feel an elevated emotion, that's when you set your intention. When you feel like it, you bring your focus back into your surroundings and try to maintain that elevated emotion that you felt, okay? And with practice, these experiences embed the new information in your mind body. Repeat it daily. It gets better and better. In summary, if we are 99.9% the same and we have the capacity to heal our subconscious minds of faulty notions of race, we can join or lead the world in developing an urgently needed global system of world citizenship.
Okay, so I just want to briefly go through a few strategies to reduce implicit bias, and we're pretty close to the breakout rooms that we're going to go to next. Here's some strategies to reduce implicit bias. Stereotype replacement, so recognizing that a response is based on stereotype, being conscious of it, and adjusting the response. In other words, you're using the conscious mind to reprogram your subconscious mind. Counter stereotyping imagining, the individual as the opposite of the stereotype, right? Imagining that is the opposite of that stereotype. See the person as individual rather than a stereotype. Learn about their personal history, right? Personalizing someone. Perspective taking, put yourself in the other person's shoes. Increasing opportunities for contact with individuals from different groups. Expanding one's network of friends and colleagues, or attending events where people of other racial, ethnic groups, gender identities, sexual orientation, other groups may be present, right? So basically using some mitigating factors to reprogram your subconscious mind. Negative, next slide. So we're gonna, before we play the video, I just want to say that this video sets you up for the breakout groups that you're going to be going to next. And in there, as Joycelin mentioned, there are three populations that she had talked about, right? There's the target population, perpetrator population, the bystander population, and all are impacted. So this is an example of all three present. And then after this, we'll go into the breakout groups. Go and play the video.
So I want you to sit down and watch this as well. Two teenagers getting into a fist fight last weekend at a New Jersey mall, but when police arrived to break it up, the black teenager was held to the ground and handcuffed, while the white teenager wasn't, and it is sparking outrage and actions of racial bias. CNN's Athena Jones has more on the story.
Accusations of racial bias by police after they broke up a fight between a pair of teenagers, one black, one white, at a New Jersey mall. A now viral video shows the teens having a heated discussion. The white teen pointing his finger in the face of the black teen, who pushes the white teen's hand away. The white teen then shoves the black teen, and the two begin to tussle. At one point, the white teen tackling the black teen and pinning him to a couch, then throwing him to the ground. When police arrive to break up the fight, a female officer pulls the white teen away and pushes him to the couch without handcuffs, while the other officer presses the black teen to the ground and kneels on his back. The female officer also coming over to kneel on the teen's upper back while they place him and only him in handcuffs. Oh no! Treatment some viewed as unequal, unfair, and racially biased. One bystander exclaiming in surprise as police handcuffed the black teen.
Yo, it's because he's black.
CNN affiliate WCBS spoke with one of the teens involved, 14-year-old Kai, who asked that his last name not be used.
I was confused, why they saw me as a bad person, me as a aggressor.
The eighth grader telling CNN affiliate WABC the fight began after he stood up for a friend, a seventh grader, being picked on by the other teen, who the station identifies as a high school student. The teen calling the encounter with police scary and frustrating.
If they don't know how to treat the situation and deal with the situation equally and fairly, then they shouldn't be able to deal with the situation at all.
New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy saying,
I'm deeply disturbed by what appears to be a racially disparate treatment in the video. We are underscore with emphasis that we're committed to increasing the trust between law enforcement on the one hand and the communities they serve on the other.
So I just want to say a few things about the video. I guarantee you those officers in the video woke up and explicitly were saying my job is to protect and serve. But on a subconscious, implicit level, they did something different. And that's really what we're talking about here. So we're not talking about racism, which is an intentional explicit act. We're talking about implicit bias, something we all need to learn more about, and so forth. So I understand you guys be put in breakout groups. I encourage you to stay for that. There's some exercise that we want you to go through, and then we're going to come back and it'll be your opportunity to share. There'll be someone kind of taking notes in each group. And so we really encourage you to stay to learn from each other and to kind of absorb some of the things we shared. And then Joycelin and I, that's our feedback. We want to hear kind of what how you heard us. Joycelin, you want to say anything?
We want to hear from you.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to put people on the spot. So you can talk to Joycelin and to all of us and to Bob. So I think let's start with room 1, maybe. So Beth, I'm gonna put you up there.
Let's see. Oh, yeah. We were super lucky and had Bob in our group, so it was really fantastic. We got on, our group was talking about world citizenship, and we kind of got talking about the concept of the balance of a universal auxiliary language, and kind of clarifying that's not taking away everyone's diversity, it's kind of adding another language so people can communicate. And then Bob was talking about that, and then he was also helping us kind of think through eliminating religious prejudice, like that being another barrier. So I feel like, Bob, I should have you speak. And Dawn was also taking notes. So
no, you're doing great. You're doing great. Keep going.
But yeah, it was really excellent. I think I think people really it was very thought-provoking, the presentation. Like, people really enjoyed just kind of I personally just found it extremely empowering, this idea of our neuroplasticity and how we can really work to change our reactions to things. It kind of, I think so often we can get a little cynical and despairing about the ability of human beings to overcome some of these prejudices. And so having this kind of very empowering just way of thinking about this deep meditation, I found it very hopeful. And then I'm trying to think what else our group, Dawn, I don't know if there was anything else I'm missing or I didn't sum up from our group? Is there anything else that I missed besides talking about?
No, I think that was good. You know, once we clarified that we weren't talking about assimilation.
Right.
No, we were talking about an auxiliary language that would enable us to move with ease throughout the world. So that was good clarification.
We had a really long talk about what it means to be a world citizen, how that ties in with racism, and how everyone could have a different definition of racism. And the conversation kind of went from there. Our guiding question was like, how can we align our attitudes, behaviors, and actions with the concept of world citizenship? And we talked about the difference between being a global citizen and being a global tourist. And yeah.
Well said.
In room 2, our question was, what can you do as an individual or a group to heal the disease of racism? And we did talk about that. We've had pieces of this in other meetings together, but it just there was so much more added to that tonight. And one of the things that a few things that came up is that we felt like someone said that we really need to understand our own bias and really look into that and recognize it and then and understand it. And so before we could go on and do something about it. We talked about how important it is being part of a group like Respond to Racism or a church or some organization that we're learning from each other, because we can really learn so much from each other. And that we really need to work together to bring implicit bias to the surface. And I think I just said that, and learn from it. We also talked about several books, and I didn't write them all down, but from different authors from different groups, so we can all understand. I think that leads to us all understanding how we are alike, and helps us understand what people are going through and put ourselves in people's shoes. And we listed several, and if anybody in the group wants to share and chat some of those books we talked about. We talked about my grandmother's house. We talked about The Yellow House. We talked about a book by Chinua Achebe. We talked about several, and I couldn't write them all down.
Right.
And one more thing. So if we're in a situation where we notice bias or prejudice, that not to go in with to go into a situation with humility, not to go in to save the world and here I am and I'm going to make a difference, but you have to go in with humility and work through it with the people around you. And then the last one, somebody really pointed out, I think it's really important to find points of unity.
Hello, everyone. I was in breakout room 3. And we were the perpetrator population. So we were discussing about what the impacts of being a perpetrator has on a person's mind or body. And just to clarify, perpetrators, an individual or group with explicit or implicit thoughts and behaviors promoting harm and injury to the target population. So in our group, we had a really good discussion about specifically trying to identify things in ourselves that we could use our own personal experiences to identify. And a lot of what we talked about was the guilt and shame and the idea of protecting oneself, and in doing that, creating an us versus them mentality. The way that group behaviors enable you to do things that you otherwise wouldn't, and the shame that can creep in afterwards, and how you can feel burdened by that hurt, and then or dissociate and shut down as a result. And so a lot of what we talked about was that group mentality, how you react defensively to protect yourself, and in that group you can it enables you to do that, but then afterwards you can feel all that like hurt and shame, and you justify it to make yourself feel better. So a lot of it was talking about that, and I think it was really good, and I think we did a lot of like good introspection for that.
Great job, Karuna. It's perfect. Covered it all.
Yep.
So our group was, I felt like very open, and we had about like 6 or 7 people be really vulnerable with their experiences and thoughts. So we had there was a lot of talk about seeing things and recognizing things and immersing ourselves in action and realizing, I guess, the connection between like seeing this like bigotry or racism happen, and after this presentation that you guys put on, realizing like the feelings associated with it and the mark that it leaves on people, and how these experiences like shape who these people are. And even if you're like a bystander, well, ours was about the perpetrator. Sorry, just kidding. The target population. How does racial trauma affect the mind, body of the target population? And one person especially said that there's no like one size fits all answer to this question, because everyone has their own individual experiences, and that's intrinsic to who they are. So but yeah, no, I felt like our group was really great at realizing what's happening, thinking about it, recognizing feelings, and working to, I guess, like be a better world citizen.
There were a lot of ally folks in our group. And I would just add to what you were saying, Joni, I think the comments about taking in the comprehensive manner that racism, in which racism impacts folks in the target position. Like just this really comprehensive view that you've offered, and people just really taking that in, whether it's from the list of health impacts, different parts of the body, the impact on the amygdala, in terms of how memories get shaped and held in that space. I know it's a part of the brain, but I'm calling it a space. And then also in terms of just the impact of racial trauma impacting emotional health. And then one person was talking about using the experience of experiencing religious bigotry as a way to reflect on how that experience impacted them, their body, their emotions, as a way to build empathy and connectedness for how someone experiencing racial bigotry might experience it. Mm-hmm. Did I get that right, Joni? Okay.
You said it beautifully.
Okay.
We were the 5th group, and we are were the bystander. Our guiding question was, how does witnessing racial trauma affect the mind body of the bystander population? A lot of feelings came up in our group as far as how it does affect mind body. Powerlessness, helplessness, disturbed, acknowledging vicarious trauma, and just saying, by witnessing them, you are traumatized. Confusion, and about what they actually experienced. It was brought up, the school incident when they interviewed the young man that was being held down. Just that confusion of, what happened there? Anger, frustration. One in our group brought up the challenge of the amygdala being triggered and that fun fight, flight, freeze. And so many times a bystander may want to have a response, but they find they're still in the freeze mode.
Right.
And the brain just doesn't always give that answer. We discussed or quickly noted the safety always needs to come first too. Everybody's own personal safety. Terry, you are our note taker. I would love to see what you got.
You did a great job, Leslie. The only couple of things, sometimes while you do feel powerless to step in, you may get a whiff of power and start recording an interaction, which I thought was an interesting comment, because it is easy to freeze and, not know what to do. But I think with training, you can kind of overcome that. And then other people just talked about, when you see things or you hear things, as a bystander, it hurts your heart, and when things hurt your heart, they make you feel sick to your stomach, they make you angry. All of those emotions can impact your physical body in a negative way.
There was thankfulness for your presentation as well, and that it's hard to, it was enjoyed, although it's a tough topic. Funny to think about it as an enjoyment, but kudos to your presentation or presented.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
As we do this work, both of us being members of the target population, we have to pace ourselves so that we are not re-traumatized. We sometimes share stories between us of things that have happened. And so I find that I'm passionately dedicated to doing the work. But we talked about personal safety first. And so in this process, I found that I have to do a little bit and recuperate, do a little bit and recuperate. So even though I have all this information, I'm still learning to apply it for myself. So it's a constant learning process, and trying to do it in such a way that we don't re-traumatize ourselves or traumatize other people. I wanted to add one more thing about the World Citizenship piece, and I don't know if I overlooked this, but the basic premise of it is that everyone is included, everyone has rights, and everyone has responsibilities. So that would be individually, nationally, and internationally. So.
Okay. First of all, thank you to our guests tonight, our speakers, our presenters, our friends.
Yes.
Our new people. Our action items for the poll. Can you commit to an action proposed tonight? Yes or no? And is there anything else? You want some merchandise like t-shirts, Black Lives Matter signs? There will be a link in the chat for you to order to happen if you want them. And thank you for all of you tonight, our attendees, our facilitators, our tech people, our organizers. Thank you so much. It takes a village to do this work.
Right.
And thank you so much. I'm so happy to be a part of the village. Take care. Thank you and good night.
Thank you for watching another RTR production of Respond to Racism's monthly community meeting. To find out more information about Respond to Racism and today's meeting, visit www.respondtoracism.org and consider making a donation through our website to support future meetings and community events.